2026 Audit and Finance Committee meeting to order. Ms. Bailey is out very sick this morning, so I'll be taking the reins for her. The first item that we're gonna cover is the adoption of the agenda, item 1B.
I make a motion to add to the agenda.
Motion is to amend the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, well,
Oh.
I'm sorry. Yeah, please state what it is. We're not, my coffee hasn't kicked in quite yet.
Adding 2F, the 2023 to 2028 capital program, phase 5, sales tax budget reallocation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, good. All right, with that, that we will now work off of an amended agenda. Mr. Broey, can I see that so that I can
Sure,
keep
sure.
it? Next item on the agenda is 1C, approval of the February 4th, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, then we'll move on to items 2A, the community CBOs, community-based organizations. I'll hand that over to Mr. Prentice.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So first item we have for your consideration this morning is the request for a recommendation for funding for community-based organizations. A couple of years ago, we started a process to streamline consideration of funding requests from nonprofit entities, especially in consideration with the new weighted student funding model that was adopted. As the district, now has a source for schools to be able to partner directly with entities that serve their school populations. And so the goal here was to create a conduit for kind of district-wide community-based organization wraparound services that the committee and board saw of value to the district. And so we also created an application process, a ranking process, and centralized the reporting for any entity that received funding from the district throughout the year. All of those things are due January 31st of each year, and then we've made it a practice to bring the recommendation to the Audit and Finance Committee in March so that it routes through to the board the same month. So you'll see in the attachments, there is a document that is the funding recommendation, and then there's another attachment that has all of the applications included. We went through these applications with a committee that included representation from finance and academics throughout the organization, and reviewed them and created a scoring matrix based on the matrix that's set forth in the process that we developed. And ultimately are recommending funding for 2 organizations. The first is Vision to Learn. That's an organization that provides glasses to students throughout the district. It's this district-wide service that brings in a lot of philanthropy in addition to the funding that CCSD provides each year. And it's something that we began a partnership with back during the COVID era when we were receiving ESSER funds. That's proved to be value to the district and provide services again throughout the county. And then the second is the Community Resource Center, which provides basic needs through their multiple outlets throughout the district, through food, clothing, and other supports to families and students. There were many other applications, many had merit, but when we looked at the number of pupils served in those applications or the limited nature of service, we believe that those were probably better suited to be opportunities where schools could partner if they believe those services were beneficial to their individual communities. And we also considered applications where funding is already provided by the district. So there were a number of entities that requested funding that already receive an allocation. And some have received an allocation for a number of years, and we believe that allocation that they receive is suitable at this time. So the recommendation is for $50,000 to Vision to Learn and $35,000 to the Community Resource Center.
Mr. Prentice, I have a question. I accidentally exited out of my thing here. Okay, so we have 2 different links to click on. So are you not recommending Art Pot at all?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so just the Vision to Learn and the other one. Is Art Pot being used anywhere else? Are they're already in service with the district?
Yes, ma'am.
So that would be kind of a double up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's
Individual schools have opted to use
their
their
weighted student
services through their
formula.
WSF. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just know that they specifically are for our multi-language learners in a Hispanic community.
And they are an outstanding partner.
And they're a good organization. That's all I have. Mr. Rooster?
Oh, I thought that was very thorough. My only question is that you have $200,000 and you're only recommending 85. Is there a reason for it?
So last year, we only awarded to Vision to Learn. That was the final recommendation. And really just in consideration of the individual applications and the impact. Like when you look through the list, we already partner with Reading Partners and Navigation Center. And then a number of the other applications below that line were just much smaller groups of service. And so we wanted to just award to those that kind of met that criteria.
Mr. Garrett?
None.
Mr. Kent? Meredith or Stephen, did either of you have anything?
Yeah, Mr. Pernis, I had a quick question on the length of service to CCSD. Is that the length of time that the organization has been working with CCSD?
Yes, ma'am.
So I was just wondering why, I mean, if you could provide some insight on why that was part of the criteria for the scoring metrics, because if it's a new organization coming in and doing an application, I feel like that would ultimately ding them because they wouldn't have had any tenure with CCSD previously.
So, and I completely understand the question. I think that the idea here is that, our partners that provide wraparound services across the district ideally have had an opportunity to prove themselves working with individual communities on a smaller scale before they come to the district centrally to request funding. But if there's one that was dinged, for that consideration that is believed to be of merit that we should consider, I definitely want to make sure that we're identifying those.
Okay.
But yeah, that this process and schools have a less stringent process to go through, but it's more ROI based. So they would submit a WSF plan amendment and identify a SMART goal, and ultimately the outcomes that they'd like to see through that partnership. But they wouldn't have to necessarily at all consider prior service to the district or any of these other metrics that are included for proportional funding received from outside entities and all those other kind of things if they wanted to partner at the school level.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Duke, did you have anything?
No, I'm good.
All right, would someone like to make, Mr. Garrett?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the item moves forward to the regular board member, or board meeting at the end of the month. So the next item up is going to be 2B, fixed cost of ownership. Mr. Burrow, where does this fall? Where do we put this on the agenda? 2F?
Yeah.
Okay. 2B, fixed cost of ownership. I will turn it over to Mr. Burrow.
Yes, ma'am. This funding effort is to be able to add on to the North Charleston High School gym complex. As we analyzed the needs that were out there, we had envisioned that we'd be able to use capital maintenance sales tax money. But as we looked at the new construction versus capital maintenance, it fell more on the new construction side. So working with Mr. Prentice, we came up with a concept to use fixed cost of ownership funds and move sales tax funds to backfill fixed cost of ownership funds. So that's why we've got a multiple phase reallocation here. This one specifically takes fixed cost of ownership money, 7.2 million from IT, 4.8 million from FM to fund that gym complex at North Charleston High School. And then subsequent allocations will move sales tax money back to cover those projects that we're taking FCO money from. Our goal is to eventually have 2 gyms on every campus. North Charleston is the next size gym that needs to be added. Right now, they do a lot of movement of students off campus to get them to a gym complex, and that creates a very big challenge with getting students home from that neighborhood. by having this second gym, they'll be able to have more competition, more practice time on their own campus. It also relocates their entrance and concession stands. If you've ever been to a basketball game there, it doesn't go right into the gym. It's kind of offset from that. So it really creates a true gym environment for that complex. So again, the overall project is 12 million.
All right, any questions? Mr.
Question.
Jerry?
So B and D essentially go together.
So so C write-up goes with this, correct?
It's all good now.
Yeah. Okay, and the D goes with this as well.
Yeah, B, C, and D are all connected. So B handles the FCO piece, and then C and D handle the sales tax contingency piece for facilities and technology.
Do I have a motion?
Would the board consider approving then B, C, and D at once, or there may be
If you would make
questions?
that motion, I'm willing to accept that.
I move to approve items B, C, and D.
Should we hear on all three of them then before we vote?
It just lists the projects that we're going to move.
Is
money.
it the same?
Yeah, so B is moving the FCO projects out of FCO and replacing them with the funding for the gym. C is handling the technology piece, and then D is handling the facilities piece, both in the Phase 4 sales tax to use contingency to cover those projects. And really what we've looked at is how do we leverage all the funding that we have available to us using the least restrictive and most restrictive sources to fund projects thoughtfully. So, the sales tax, of course, has specific allowances for capital maintenance and technology. And then, but it doesn't necessarily allow things like the gym, whereas FCO is a least restrictive source that's authorized through an annual process that's board controlled, which would allow us to pick up something like the gym so that we're able to do all the things within all the approved sources. And we're really starting to look at our long range capital plan now too, to figure out how to make sure that, our annual budget planning for capital includes consideration for those sources that are available to be able to match the most appropriate dollar to the most appropriate project. But yes, I think take them all together is totally fine.
Is there a second to your motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, all three items, B, C, and D will move forward to the regular board meeting at the end of the month. And then, so next item up is item 2E, adoption of resolution for general obligation bonds. Mr. Prentice?
Yes, ma'am. So this is an annual GO bond issue that we do, particular to the sales tax program. So whenever the referendum was approved in 2020, before the sales tax program started, we issued some early out funding to be able to get projects off the ground. And as you might have heard Mr. Barowie say before, we were able to complete and open a school within a year after the referendum started as a result, because we were able to get those projects started sooner. And so we issued the GO bond, and then essentially as the revenues are collected, those revenues serve to pay off the GO bond throughout the term of the program. So this issue is authorizing up to $160 million, which is the outstanding amount that we roll each year for sales tax. But I will say that this year our plan is to pay down approximately $100 million of that, where we'll probably only issue 60 million. And then next year, we will no longer do the GO, and we'll just pay off the remaining 60 million as revenues have layered themselves in to be able to defease the bonds. The other thing I'll mention is typically at this point in the year, you're seeing two issues, and we're working on a process now to consolidate our debt issuance as our cash flow model and analysis and everything has been completed, to where we're only issuing debt one time per year. So in the past, what we've done is issue a ban in the spring, and then which is a bond anticipation note, and then issue a GO bond in the fall. And the GO bond pays off the bond anticipation note, and then the GO bond is paid off with revenues when the revenues come in from property taxes. And of course, along the way, you're paying interest on both of those issues. And so as part of this consolidation to where we only do a GO bond issue in the summer, we're going to be able to use our cash flow to support not having to do the ban at all, and we'll just issue a one-time GO bond for a year and then pay it off when property tax revenues come in, which will save several $1 million in interest each year. So our cash flow position has allowed us to consider things a little bit differently than we did in years past, which is why you're not seeing the ban resolution this year and you're just seeing the GO bond. And then instead of doing a debt issue this fall, typically closing in November, we'll bring something back to the committee in May timeframe to close probably in August, September, which will begin the process of a consolidated once annual issuance for all the things that we have for FCO, sales tax, and our IPRB payments. So this right here will be the last kind of spring issue that we do. And again, it's just for the sales tax GO bond. And I will say that the other piece that I mentioned, I'm planning to bring a significant analysis with a review to the committee in May to go over all of those details in extensive fashion so that you have an opportunity to ask questions. I just wanted to highlight the reason why there's not a resolution out there today for the bond anticipation note for the IPRB payment that you typically see this time of year. And that's because we're working on that piece of it coming forward the next couple of months.
All right.
Move
Yeah.
to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any-
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and with that, the motion passes to the regular board meeting. Next item is item 2F. It's the 2023-2028 capital program phase 5 sales tax budget reallocation. That's a lot. Ms. Shaw, would you like to?
She's on the line. She's on Zoom.
Yes, Ms. Watley, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can.
ma'am.
Okay, perfect. And greetings, committee members. This particular item is in relation to the James Island Early Learning Annex that we are doing. Coming up in the month of April, we would like to award a general contractor to start construction on the project. This particular reallocation, we were able to complete early college high school project as well as the Johns Island Elementary School with savings of a total of about $1.5 million. We're able to close those two projects out and bring it forth. For this particular item, we need about $3.1 million. And so we're taking our savings, adding it to the 3.1. And for the remaining balance of about $1.7 million, we're going to request to use projected revenues out of the phase 5 sales tax program. So that's what I'm coming forth for you today for that consideration. Pending any questions.
Any questions? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it will move to the regular board meeting at the end of the month. The next item up is information only. So we move to items 3A, revised procurement. Mr. Prentice?
Yes, ma'am. So we typically, anytime we amend any standard operating procedures related to financial protocol, whether it be procurement, finance SOPs, things like that, we'll bring them through the committee for information purposes. This is our revised procurement card manual. I think we probably discussed last time we amended this that we were planning on changing from Bank of America to Wells Fargo for our P card system for the district, and that conversion has since been completed. So largely, the edits in this document serve to outline the new process for how the system works in Wells Fargo. I'll note the most substantial changes are that this moves us from a paper-based to a digital workflow process. So with Bank of America, users literally received a paper statement in the mail from Bank of America, would attach paper receipts, physically sign the document, and then route it through the interoffice mail to procurement for processing. With Wells Fargo, we use an application through smartphones or on the computer, and all users have an expense management app where they can take photos or scan the receipt in. And as the transaction shows up, it has smart features that will automatically attach the receipt to the transaction and suggest the coding. People can upload notes and other documents as well as code the transaction to the general ledger. And then their supervisor receives notification of the transaction through their application, and they can approve that transaction virtually. And all of that's logged, and then it allows us to pay our account in real time instead of processing monthly statements. So you'll notice a number of changes throughout the document that talk about delegates for P cards and the various approval requirements, such as no longer doing a monthly statement approval, but generally approving transactions within 5 days of posting. The other thing that has happened since this time is we've consolidated some of the staffing and procurement. We used to have a P card administrator position that was kind of a single point of contact for all things P cards. And then we had some technician positions that were responsible for vendor maintenance and setup and other workflows throughout the department. And we've streamlined that area to have a procurement analyst position. And there's three of those folks in the office, and what they do is handle all of those tasks across the board so that if one person's out, there's cross training that exists so that everybody can provide resources to schools. And there's also a ticketing system where anytime someone has an inquiry, it logs a ticket, kind of like a help desk, and we're able to follow up and track the request to completion. So the procurement analysts now handle all the functions that the P card administrator did, and they report up through our contracts office to handle all of the P card maintenance, processing, coding, sales and use tax posting throughout the office for procurement. And Jessica, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, but happy to answer any questions. But again, this is really specific to just the new change with how we administer P cards throughout the system. And ultimately, I think the user feedback that we've gotten is that once folks have gotten trained and onboarded in the system, is that they find the digital process to be much easier to administer. And it certainly makes it easier for us to be able to track everything and receive statements on a monthly basis, as we typically process about $50 million a year in volume through P cards across the system.
Is there any particular reason why we go with like Bank of America or Wells Fargo and not say a credit union?
So Wells Fargo, several years ago, we did a request for proposals for treasury management services, and they're our banking provider. And so when we were looking at the state contract solution for P cards, which is Bank of America, so most people throughout the state use Bank of America in the public sector for P cards because it's on that state contract through the state material management office. We looked at, what our treasury management provider offered through Wells Fargo, and it was a much more robust system. So instead of going back out for another solicitation, we just opted to use services provided through that solicitation. And the other piece of this is we do get some credits and rebates and everything, and so we made sure that the rebates that were provided by Wells Fargo were comparable to what we were receiving through Bank of America. So there were no changes there.
Anybody else have any questions? Online? All right, we will move on to 3B, monthly capital projects report. Let's see. I'm waiting on my computer. Miss Costello. Good morning.
Good morning. Vice Chair Watley, Superintendent Huggins, and committee members. I'd like to present the January Capital Projects Report. Our revenue collections for the current month were fabulous. We were 2.2 million above the 2% growth over the prior year due to in the cash flow model, excuse me. The expenditures are as follows for the 2010 through 2016 program, $570,000. The 2017 through 2022 program, $3.6 million. The 2023 through 2028 program, $14.9 million. The 2023 through 2028 program funded with long-term debt was $3.8 million. Our fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 25 is in the final stages of completion. The fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 26 is currently running from March 2025 through June 2026. And the board approved in February, our fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 27 program. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, any questions?
Well, last month we also had it was over the projection. So last month, that was the November sales tax collections. This would be the December. So I don't know if there was just a lot of holiday shopping, a lot of tourists. I'm not sure, but we're very pleased with it.
And that's some of that seasonality with retail sales in particular that you see. And it's growing at a much faster clip than the 2% projection. And we're looking at some of that for our phase 6 program to, make sure that we line up with our growth trends.
I should know the answer, but the older programs, is that just money that we hold on to after the end of those programs that was not spent?
Actually, it's all been spent.
Okay. Got it. So I'm just curious, I should know the answer. Why do we still have monies going forward that are, I would think that it would be closed up in years in the past.
I think you're talking about like phase 3 and 4 projects that are still ongoing. Yeah.
Yes, all the sales tax revenues have been collected for the 2017 through 22 program, but there's still some projects to execute. And that's what is going on right now. So
And that's from funds from the current,
no, the 1722 collections
so there's
are
still.
funding funding projects. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Sounds good.
And when the committee has recommended contingency reallocations, for example, some of that contingency is derived from interest earnings on the outstanding balance, for projects that were not yet complete. And so that's how we've been able to do some additional projects that were authorized under that referendum. The way the law reads is it says that any interest accrued is posted to the master account and can be used for any authorized projects under the referendum.
All right. Thank you.
Is anybody online? Meredith or Stephen?
I'm good.
All right, thank you, Ms. Costello.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the items 3C monthly financial report. Mr. Prentice?
Yes, ma'am. So we have the monthly financial report, WSF, Head Start reports for the month of January. I'll note here, again, this is through 1/31/26, and of course, we have the budget update coming next. So some of these numbers are not as up to date as what you'll see in the budget presentation, since this is just the monthly report through that particular period. But revenues are coming in strong. Projections are still holding. We received our January payment from the treasurer's office in February. So since this report was issued, and we are right on budget for property tax revenues for the year. So we're happy to see those trends go in the direction that we expected based on our forecasting and the budget for this fiscal year. So as we get into the budget workshop, I'll detail some of those things in much more significant detail. But all in all, nothing out of the ordinary for the general operating fund. And on the Head Start side, we are working through the application for our extension through at least June 30th. And then we're still working through the application for the upcoming 5-year program based on some delays on the federal side with the shutdown. So everything is still in place for that program right now. We're just waiting on additional information from the feds to be able to advance the application for the continuation of the grant. But nothing else to share on this item.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to closing items. 4A upcoming meetings, April.
Budget,
I'm sorry.
the budget update.
Sorry, I thought we just did that. Mr. Prentice, budget report.
So I'm happy to skip it.
I need my next, I need an espresso shot. It's okay.
So, and I don't know if we can. Budget workshop. Yes, sir. They'll put the slides up there. I'll put those up on the screen for everybody to see. So we have our committee of the whole budget workshop coming up on Monday, and the slides that we have prepared for that committee of the whole budget workshop, we've gotten into the practice of sharing those with audit and finance in advance so that the committee is prepared each step of the way through the budget process. And so I'm going to bring the slides up for the workshop that will be shared on Monday. And I don't believe there's going to be many, if any, changes to this deck before we get into Monday's meeting. Wanted to run through all of that with the committee first. You're good.
Mr. Garrett, I'm a little bit out of order here, but you were, before we began the meeting, you had a line item question. Was that on this or did we already cover it?
No, I was just asking about the North Charleston, the B, C, and D.
Oh, to
Yeah.
group them together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. So start out, just brief agenda. We'll go over the current year performance, what I mentioned when we were talking about the general operating fund report for January. This is a bit more fresh. Some revenue projections updates for FY27, including some tracking, monitoring of changes that may be coming out of the budget process at the state level, with the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office making some recommendations to changes to the state aid to classrooms formula. And then we'll just talk about our overall budget philosophy and some funding considerations for FY27. I don't know if the screen is shared. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm not able to see it yet. It says the boardroom has started screen sharing, but not able to view it.
Yeah, I might just have to start it over.
Apparently our technology needs another shot of espresso this morning too.
Uh-huh.
I have everything from this computer.
There you go. Ms. Ferguson, can you see it if you go back to the presentation? There you go. Can you see it now?
Yes, now I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So if you can go to that slide following the agenda, please. One more on. There we go. So looking at FY26 performance, these are our revenue projections as of February 27th. You can see that property tax revenues are projected to come in right on budget. We're looking at a 0.31% variance, $1.8 million over budget in revenue collections, predominantly through some additional collections in fee in lieu of tax and delinquent tax, as we're very conservative in those areas. And so we built the model around that. But we're right on the money with our ad valorem current property tax collections, which is real personal property, including vehicles. Small variance in intergovernmental revenues. We're just adjusting the budget going into FY27 to account for that. And we are seeing about a 2.79% variance over budget in state revenues, as we've seen our enrollment increase, which is typically outpacing the trend of enrollment through other public school districts in South Carolina. As well as our index of taxpaying ability decreasing, as some other counties are growing in terms of their overall share of assessed value throughout the state, which is a good thing for us because that index of taxpaying ability, the higher it is, the less of a share you're receiving of the state revenue through state aided classrooms and overall formula. So we're adjusting some of those assumptions for next year accordingly. And then realistically, with all of that said, we're not anticipating at this point in time that we're going to need to use any of the fund balance that we budgeted for FY26. When you go down to the bottom chart, you can see that we're projecting savings in salaries and benefits, and some small savings in supplies and other objects, so that ultimately the underrun of expenditures will be slightly larger than the overage in revenue collections. And so we'll anticipate at this point to post a small positive variance in fund balance at the end of the year. But we'll refine these projections as we get into March and April, and get further into the budget process before first reading. So all good news there in terms of the revenue picture and our expenditure trends for the year. You'll note that, of course, I know everybody that's been on the committee for more than a year has seen some substantially larger variances in revenues, and we've really worked to tighten that up with our forecast and our assumptions. And we've also tightened up the salary and benefit assumptions. We've seen those numbers higher in the past in terms of savings in salaries and benefits. And we made some assumptions this year to provide for budgetary adjustments up front to account for anticipated vacancies, predominantly in classified positions, to ensure that our budget was closely aligned to expectations, but still giving us enough of a buffer. That $21 million accounts for less than one biweekly pay period through CCSD. So just to give you an idea of the order of magnitude of what we're looking at there. We go on to the next slide. And then for FY27, we're anticipating growth in revenue through local sources most substantially as we continue to see strong property tax base growth. And we're still anticipating to see some growth in our state revenues. Some of that growth is through adjustments based on the assumptions for this year and picking up some of that revenue that was not budgeted in FY26 and right sizing that budget, but also still anticipating some enrollment growth and the additional components of the formula that I'll get into here in just a moment. But all told, our goal at this point in time is to balance the budget with a $15 million use of fund balance, which would be half of what we balanced the budget on this year. In FY25, we balanced the budget on $62 million, and we only used 15 million of that fund balance. And then this year, of course, we balanced it on half of that amount, and we're not projecting to use any at this point in time. So we're continuing to just kind of sustainably work our way out of having to use fund balance to balance the budget each year as property tax and state revenues take hold and grow to support our programs in a sustainable way. But all that to be said, if you remember conversations from 2 years ago, we have $37 million in fund balance that was committed for post-ESSER programs, and our goal was to use that fund balance to support the launch of weighted student funding. So we will continue to use a little bit of fund balance or budget a little bit of fund balance year over year from that committed allocation until that $37 million is used. And so that's where the budgeted use for FY27 will strictly be from that committed pot because we've only used 15 of the 37 million thus far. So we're not dipping into any of our unassigned fund balance, and everything still remains well above policy thresholds. We'll talk about this briefly, and I will get into this in much more detail in April. But last year, during the state's budget process, the General Assembly asked the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office to analyze the state aid to classrooms formula, which is the formula that drives the majority of our state revenue. They were asked to consider various changes that would promote further equity throughout the state in the distribution of funding, and ultimately came up with 9 recommendations that they made this year to the General Assembly for the budget process for FY27. We brought in someone to help us analyze this because we've gotten very little information from the state, and I think everybody's just kind of a little bit in the dark, not knowing which recommendations would be taken and what the impact of those recommendations would be. So we modeled them all internally to understand what each scenario would do to CCSD's state revenue because it's such a critical piece of our budget. And obviously changes to that, if they were negative to the district or in a way that promoted our inability to budget thoughtfully, would be impactful to this process. And so what you see there in the chart is the status quo, and then all of the recommendations, and then the final column on the right, what's included in the governor's proposed budget. So the most notable change from the status quo is that the 9 scenarios taken together eliminated several of the weights for weighted pupil unit calculations. So, for example, a single individual student with no student with disabilities classification, CTE enrollment, gifted and talented, limited English proficiency classifications is worth 1. One student was worth 1.08. And what this changed was it changed every student to be worth a 1.1 weight. And eliminated all of these add-on categories. So you can see from the first column to the second column in the middle, that where you had gifted and talented, which is G&T, academic assistance, LEP, which is limited English proficiency, those went to 0. So where you used to get a 0.15 add-on for a gifted and talented student, you no longer got any add-on. and where you had 0.15 for academic assistance or 0.2 for limited English proficiency, meaning a multilingual learner, you no longer got an add-on weight, and every student was just worth 1.1. And so that in and of itself was negatively impactful to CCSD because of the volume of gifted and talented and multilingual learners in particular that we have in the district, that we would no longer get consideration for with add-on weights and would all be blended into that 1.1, is that weighted pupil unit value is taken into consideration when you're looking at our share of state revenue. The other thing that was a major impact of CCSD was they were going to change the enrollment count used for calculating state revenues from the year that you were in to the prior year. So typically you get revenue based on the current fiscal year's enrollment, and then it's adjusted throughout the year. And they were going to fix the enrollment at the prior fiscal year's final enrollment for the upcoming year's revenue calculation. So we would be using FY26 revenues, or excuse me, FY26 enrollment for FY27 revenues after just having gotten FY26 revenues based on FY26 enrollment. And so for a growing district, that would be negative because we wouldn't get any of the growth consideration until the prior year, and that would really stall the revenue growth for state aid to classrooms, to CCSD in particular. All told, there's several other adjustments in here in terms of the teacher salary that they use, and some other considerations for weights for charter brick and mortar and charter online. Excuse me. The charter component ended up being a positive thing for us because CCSD is a charter authorizer with 9 charter schools under our belt. And so you can see where the charter brick and mortar and online weights went from 1.25 and 0.5 respectively down to 0. And those essentially got rolled into the overall per pupil consideration across the district versus separate breakout weights. And that helped us out because that essentially meant that charter enrollment was being considered as part of the overall formula for distribution. And we got a little bit more proportional revenue for those charter students than we were getting previously. So all that said, from the modeling that we've done, if all 9 scenarios were taken, it would pretty well flatline our state aid to classrooms revenue, which would not be a good thing given the trajectory that we've been on. However, the governor's budget does not take all of those recommendations. It only takes certain recommendations, including restoring the add-on weights, which is critical for us. So it does not take those down to 0. It leaves those in place, but it does add in the changes for the charter formula and some of the considerations that were good for CCSD. And it also leaves the enrollment count used based on the current year and not rolling back to the prior year. So our advocacy at this point in time is for the General Assembly to take the governor's recommended budget with respect to state aid to classrooms, which is contained in what's named Proviso 1.3 of the state's budget, which they update every year pertinent to this formula. But we're continuing to monitor this. We've advocated at the state level that the governor's budget be the solution that ultimately the House and the Senate take up. And at this point in time, House Ways and Means has made recommendations that include the governor's proposal with this area not being changed. So we're optimistic that the state's budget will move forward, and that's what we built our assumptions around for FY27, but we've been conservative with those assumptions. And ultimately, once we get final numbers from the state with all of these changes considered, we may true up our revenue to the good just a little bit. But we're continuing to be conservative with those for the time being until we have some finality to it. So all that said, we roll into the next slide with the 5-year model. So big part of the model includes those state revenues, and we have considered the changes to the formula recommended by Revenue and Fiscal Affairs and have been conservative with those state revenues in the model. This is the same thing that we shared, I think it was last month when we provided the initial update to the 5-year financial forecast, which shows for next year being able to balance the budget with small use of fund balance, about half of where we were this year, but ultimately ending the year with a small positive variance, and then ultimately being able to sustain the budget through 2031 without having to implement a tax increase and without using fund balance above our policy threshold.
Remind us again the difference between the baseline
Mhm.
expenditure or the actual expenditure or the same for the revenue side. What's the best baseline versus the other number?
So the baseline is the solid line for revenues and expenditures is the budget, and then the dotted line is the projection. So the baseline is essentially what the anticipated budget would be for that year, and then the dotted line is the expected outcome. So when we looked at the model and looked at budget to actual trends, we built budget assumptions obviously based on one trend line and then built the actuals based on outcomes at the end of the year, knowing that we're conservative in areas such as salaries and benefits, and that typically our revenues have outpaced in certain areas based on conservatism there as well. And so just because we budget, the 15 million, for example, in FY27, because of that conservatism, we're anticipating that we would actually have a small positive variance. And so that outcome line is what's used for projecting fund balance.
So sorry, I'm still confused. I apologize.
That's good.
Which one is the one that you're using ones based on your current budget, and then you're tweaking the other one, correct?
Correct. So the model adjusts both of those lines. So the red line and the solid black line are the revenue and expenditure budget projections, and then the dotted lines are the anticipated final state.
Okay, so the
Yep.
dotted lines are really what you're closer to what you're forecasting.
Correct. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that's what-
Absolutely. Yep. But when you look at the budget, like if you go down to the next chart, and this kind of gives an example of that on the next page. The dotted line that runs through that chart is what our fund balance would be if we came in at budget for revenues and expenditures every year. But the black bar is the anticipated fund balance based on the projections, because the fund balance, has ultimately been used at a lesser clip than what we've initially budgeted at the beginning of the year. And so we wanted to show, the kind of anticipated state, which is very different from the budgeted situation year over year.
So let me grossly oversimplify. Just so if we track based on budget, we would end up at, I'm looking at the fund balance.
Correct.
We would track towards that dotted line, but our history, which often includes, salaries that don't get spent because of unfilled positions. If our history continues, we would be closer to the solid bar.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, really.
Thanks.
So, and that's, the reality being that if we continue the trend that we've been on in 2031, we should still have close to $200 million in fund balance, which is about $6 million above our policy requirement at that point in time. So, we're tracking in the right direction, and we've made adjustments over the last couple of years. I included some notes down there, that initially we projected fund balance for FY25 to drop down to $186.9 million. But that was, again, kind of the beginning of the 5-year forecast before we had a lot of these assumptions refined over the course of multiple years with the detailed history built into the model that we now have from 2 completed years and projections for FY26 year end. And, the $62 million in fund balance that we budgeted. And so now, as you look to the future, it's stabilized a lot more over the course of the upcoming 5 years. If you go on to the slide following that. So nothing really new here. Philosophy with the budget is to let growth pay for growth. And really, we want to sustainably incorporate new programming. So universal pre-K, some of the things that you'll see with the Peninsula Promise this year, trying to build in new programs as growth in the budget allows for it, but also slowly tapering the use of fund balance and maintaining reserves above the district's fund balance policy, so that we can look to the future prepared for what's coming and knowing where we're going, and to be able to make good assumptions for upcoming years and programs without operating in that 1-year vacuum. And then if you go to the next slide, the budget strategy, of course, we want to sustain the academic gains that we've been seeing with student outcomes and focusing our spending on ROI. There's a lot of work that we're going to be doing this year on completing the return on investment toolkit for weighted student funding that we talked about last year. So that work is almost finished, and we're going to be delivering scorecards that show the most effective and efficient strategies in weighted student funding based on the per pupil cost and the overall student outcomes based on formative and summative assessment data. So we want to continue to do that. obviously enhance our weighted student funding as we've seen that that program's working. There's evidence that we've seen strong gains tied to the implementation of weighted student funding and also increasing the per pupil amount in the weighted student funding model. I want to continue to increase school autonomy and equitable resource distribution, and we'll talk a little bit about that and further in this presentation, and then to maintain the 5-year financial forecast. Go to the next slide. The budget strategy, all new expenditures total about $47 million. We're planning to be able to bring a balanced budget to the committee in April. So you'll see the committee of the whole budget workshop in April, and then we'll have a special called meeting later in April that's on the budget calendar to make a recommendation to the board for first reading of the budget, which they'll take up at their April meeting. And then if everything works the way that we hope on the calendar, we would have second reading and public hearing in May, which has worked really well for us this year, and being able to execute and implement the budget before the July 1 start date of the fiscal year to give people an opportune time to complete hiring decisions and to be able to do some summer planning before the school year starts. And the use of fund balance for FY27 will be less than projected in prior versions of our model based on strong performance as we continue to refine those assumptions. And then we'll step into some of the funding considerations. If you go to the next slide. So we try to package this based on what we have to do and then things that we want to do based on our long-range planning and strategies, as well as new programming. So the first are the things that we really believe that we need to do to continue all programming. The first is providing all employees with step increases. So if we left our scale exactly as it is and just gave every employee a step on the classified and certified scale, it would be about a $10.7 million increase to the salary and benefit expenditures to the district. FY27 formula allocation increases. So this is all new positions earned by schools based on enrollment projections. This number last year was $5.6 million in new formula allocations. And we've really tightened up those enrollment projections too, working with the planning and real estate team. So the formula allocation increases for FY27 is only $682,000, meaning that schools are now earning by formula in their enrollment projections what we believe they need to be able to meet the requirements of their enrollment based on the schedules that are established for formula for positions to be allocated to each school. And so that's the number of positions added. And then we do have a small contingency set aside for enrollment adjustments between the first day of school and the 10th day when we look at variances between the projections and the actuals. Charter school allocation, $6.1 million increase in charter school payments purely based on the state formula. If you've seen anything in the last week or so, we've been advocating in Columbia for some changes to the Charter School Act that would create some more equity and consideration for local district authorizers to make sure that local school districts that authorize charter schools are given consideration separate from the state public charter school district and institutes of higher education because of the way the funding flows. And so we're monitoring that, and that may have some impact on the budget process to the good for local school districts going into FY27. But right now we're looking at $6.1 million in additional expenses for charters. We're seeing a decrease in Meeting Street Schools allocation, 2.7 million. So this year we budgeted based on a higher enrollment that they ultimately had. And so we're truing that up based on their enrollment for FY26 and their projected enrollment for FY27, but also in consideration of the new agreement that was approved by the Board of Trustees back a month or so ago. So we're aligning that budget with expected outcomes. And then we have some contractual obligations in the amount of $2.8 million for custodial, transportation, some of those ongoing things that the district's committed to for multiple years, rolling those up into the budget. For the next. So personnel increases for non-certified positions. We're looking at a 3% increase plus a step. So it's about an average of a 4.9% increase for all non-certified employees at $6.1 million. And then we're increasing the teacher pay scale across every cell by $2,718, which gets the base teacher salary to $67,500. So our objective over the last few years was to start to kind of normalize the annual increase to the teacher pay scale to be more aligned with CPI. So that's $2,700 this year. We expect it'll be about $2,500 next year. And so that cost about $12.3 million. So that is about half what we saw in new salary and benefit expenditures for the teacher pay scale increase over this past year. As we did two substantial swings in 25 and 26. And then we'll start to see that just really normalize based on cost of living adjustments for the out years. And that's what's modeled going forward. So that's $18.4 million of the budget. And then for non-salary expansions, we met with all of our departments to go through their request, make sure that we've considered things that are needed outside of their reallocation of non-salary funds. So there's various other operational increases as well as operational contractual increases related to increased facility square footage where we have to amend our contracts to add, for example, additional custodial day porter services when we've built a new facility or expanded a facility to additional square footage. Some costs for security officers and our SRO agreements and our crossing guards. We're annualizing the cost of the middle school search team that was implemented for 6 months this year, adding some additional spare buses to help with our bus routes, as well as increasing our bus monitors, an application for student behavior management with First Student, providing some additional capacity for alternative transportation, as well as transportation for Deer Park, Wando, Stall, West Ashley High School, and the Center for Advanced Studies in Angel Oak. Mr. Burrow can speak on that a little bit further if he wants to, but essentially providing a different approach to tiering those routes to provide more efficient transportation for those students, as well as changing the start time in District 9, 23, and 10 to align with the rest of the district, which has some transportation implications that we planned about 2 years ago. Increasing athletic director days from 210 to 240 to give those folks some more capacity for planning throughout the year outside of the school year for their programming and other activities that happen during the summer. Media per pupil funding, visual and performing arts, teacher supplements, and some membership and dues increases for about $4 million. So those are just a smattering of non-salary expansions that we considered that we're recommending for approval in the budget that are not really new programs, but things that bolt on to the required increases. Go to the next one. One more. And then in terms of new positions, we're recommending 60.5 additional FTEs from expansion request, which totals about $5.9 million. But what's important to note there is that really represents a significant investment in special education services. We piloted some programs this year by providing that area some contingency to add on some positions as we considered expanding low incidence classrooms with teachers and TAs, adding the services of registered behavior technicians and board certified behavior analysts and some other services that we believe will better serve students with disabilities. And so this year we're adding approximately 40 FTEs just in that area alone to be able to meet the need of the small class sizes and the enrollment trends that we're seeing throughout our schools, just to provide those base services through the special education department. And then schools, of course, also get some additional funds through weighted student funding to provide additional supports for special education students in their WSF plans. Portion of that for operations focused on quality assurance and facilities maintenance as we've grown our overall facilities portfolio and footprint, and then some content and curriculum facilitation in our core subject areas, as well as launching one more zone of employee daycare at Angel Oak with some service capacity expansion in West Ashley. Our goal over the last several years has been to launch employee daycare in one area of the district per year until we get to full execution on that. And I think we have 2 more to go after this. Small contingency for multilingual to allow them to pilot some additional programs like we did in special education this year, all told for $7.5 million in additional positions added. And that'll include some of the things that I'll share on the upcoming slides with new program expansions for the Peninsula and our Thrive day treatment facility program as well. There we go. So This was profiled in the news over the last couple of days, but we're launching a program with MUSC to create a day treatment facility at Liberty Hill Academy. And so that blends academic instruction with therapeutic support for students in pre-K through eighth grade. There's only one other example of this in South Carolina in the upstate that's proven to be a very valuable model for providing services to students that have additional needs for mental health and social emotional support that otherwise would not be able to stay in school if not for this opportunity for a day treatment facility. So our cost of $954,000 would provide the CCSD capacity for additional teachers and TAs, school psychologists, mental health support within the program. And then the partnership with MUSC would bring their medical team and some of their services to the fold to create a truly blended partnership within a CCSD facility. And so we're working on finalizing an MOU with them and hope to be able to launch this right at the beginning of the 26-27 school year at Liberty Hill to be able to take on that capacity and improve those services. But it's kind of considered as the overall student support and special education services model, but just a very specific program that we wanted to highlight. And on the next slide, we wanted to detail all of the Peninsula Promise initiatives. If you've seen in the news over the last few weeks, very extensive advancement of services on the peninsula as we consider all the community feedback over the last 2 years and some of the planning to provide more opportunities for kids on the peninsula and to consider encouraging kids that live on the peninsula to go to their neighborhood schools. These numbers will probably change a little bit to the good as we're working through some final adjustments there, but we wanted to show the current state. That includes opening a family and education center on the peninsula to provide opportunities and resources for parents to get work key certifications and some partnership opportunities through Trident Tech, as well as just general resources for how to parent their kids and how to be able to engage in the resources that exist in the CCSD network to provide the best possible outcomes, but also giving them the resources that they need to be able to get connected to jobs, and some of the model that we've implemented at Mary Ford and North Charleston essentially being translated onto the peninsula. Universal Pre-K, this is the consolidation of all of our 3s and 4s into Charleston Progressive Academy with some additional FTE requirements to be able to serve 3s and 4s without a waiting list. But you can see that number, Sanders Clyde, CPA, Mitchell, and all of the other, Meminger, all of the other peninsula-based 3 and 4 services into one facility and having all of those resources exist in one place. So that's really the kind of first launch of a universal pre-K model that we hope to roll out zone by zone over the next few years to the rest of the county. Some basic costs for the overall launch of the Peninsula project. Some of these will be one-time in nature. CTE programs at Simmons, Pinckney, and Burke, really creating middle school pathways for CTE as you move kids into high school and giving them an earlier opportunity to experience CTE in middle school as Simmons Pinckney moves to the Mitchell campus. That also includes middle school arts opportunities through the Leonard McLeod's Cultural Arts Collective, which was a partnership between Burke and Simmons Pinckney to expand the arts on the peninsula through both of those programs. A really exciting opportunity to partner with the American College of Building Arts for kids at Burke to be able to get either dual enrollment for a certificate or potentially an associate's degree by the time they graduate from the American College of Building Arts in architectural drafting, carpentry, timber framing, stone carving. I mean, there's some fascinating programs that happen there, and that's really kind of a one across the United States program that exists for preservation style building arts programs. And we want to partner with them to offer those opportunities to kids on the peninsula as kind of an integration into the CTE expansion at Burke. As well as launching a new Scholars Academy program at Burke through the College of Charleston, which would provide 30 seats for Burke students to enroll in the College of Charleston. And when they graduate from Burke would potentially be at the associate's degree level when they come out of high school. So all of that told in consideration of also moving Simmons Pinckney to the Mitchell campus and then moving the Mitchell enrollment to the other elementary programs on the peninsula, nets some savings due to the reallocations for about a $4 million increase across all of those programs.
Do you have any questions about that?
I've got.
I
Yeah, but
know you very well, so I saw your lips
Yeah.
first.
Who should I follow? I don't want to interrupt everybody. Who should I follow up with on it?
Me.
Okay. all right.
I'll give you a ring and we'll talk about all these things
Okay.
because this is a pre-K 12 initiative on the peninsula to try to bring about the change that we know is necessary for access and opportunity for all kids downtown.
Do you want to just brief them a little bit on it?
I certainly can really quickly. I'm sorry I stepped out to take a call, but
I'm good. We've still got 2 more months of budget stuff, so we got plenty of time.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
So this opens universal pre-K to ages 3 and 4 on the Charleston Progressive Academy site. It opens a family resource center over at Burke in partnership with Trident to bring about technical opportunities and work-based certifications for parents district-wide, but particularly here on the peninsula. It then transitions the students from the Burke campus currently at Simmons Pinckney to the Mitchell campus. Those 110 students will be rezoned to schools that are all rated good or above. Meminger is currently rated average, but the principal will tell you it's on its way to being excellent. We're going to expand career and technical opportunities on the Mitchell campus for middle schoolers and open the Leonard McLeod Cultural Arts Collective, expanding arts access to students in the middle grades. Then at the Burke campus, we're opening a strand of advanced academics courses similar to that at Academic Magnet and the Scholars Academy at West Ashley High School. The College of Charleston has dedicated 30 seats to Burke for that. I met with President Shue himself. We're also going to expand the Leonard McLeod Cultural Arts Collective at Burke. Again, growing the rich history created by Mr. McLeod himself. Dance, music, arts, visual arts with artists in residence opportunities for kids. And then the American College of Building Arts, the only institute of its kind in the nation, is partnering with us to offer express artisan-like crafts and trades to students at Burke, in addition to other CTE opportunities that we're expanding to Burke all in August. So I have a project manager for each part of this. We'll soon be advertising a project manager for the entire project because it's a lot for me to manage individually right now with everything else. But we've allocated in the budget. Mr. Broy has design teams and everybody's moving ahead. We had our final community meeting at Mitchell on Monday, went very well. And we're going to bring an option 5 as staff recommendation to the board for rezoning on Monday. That's more of a specific overview. Do you have questions? But you can follow up with me individually if you do.
Yeah, I just don't want to.
Bog down.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not board members.
Yeah, that's okay.
Committee members. So
You
whatever.
certainly understand your role, Mr. Garrett. I appreciate how thoughtful you are. Mr. Prentice?
All right. So, and I know there's a lot of ground to cover there. It's kind of trying to be as detailed as possible early on in terms of what all is included in the FY27 budget and breaking out some of these things from the typical slides. But that does transition us into the weighted student funding discussion. If you go to the next slide. So this just gives some background on weighted student funding from its launch in FY25. And I mentioned earlier that $37 million in fund balance that was set aside to help offset the launch of weighted student funding. We budgeted 20 million of the $62 million in fund balance in FY25 came from this ESSER sustainability component, which is 37.8 million. We ended up only using 15 of the 62, so we pulled that 15 from the committed fund balance. This year we budgeted 10, as well as a reinvestment of some savings in the WSF fund from FY25, and then we have 7.8 million set aside for FY27. But of course, since we've only spent 15 of the 37, we'll roll all of that forward. And the fund balance that we budget for FY27 will all come from that committed ESSER sustainability pot that still has about $22 million left in it. And so the overall cost of WSF in FY27 is $37.8 million, which is about a 5% increase over FY26. which was anticipated as we began the program. If you go to the next slide. So this considers the categories of pupils served, but these are not the unique pupil counts. These are the overall aggregated numbers, because you may have a pupil in poverty that's also a multilingual learner, and some that fit all three categories. So overall, there are 32,000 individual classifications when you consider that one student may fit into one, two, or three individual groups. The per pupil amount that we're recommending for FY27 is $1,446.15, which is up from the $1,353.60 in FY26. And then we apply the weights to these individual classifications of students with disabilities, pupils in poverty, and multilingual learners, which gets the actual per pupil amounts within those categories. We also have this 80% calculation, which is used for larger schools that are seeing in excess of $500,000 in organic growth per year. Bless you. We graduated the calculation for those, which is predominantly impacting West Ashley High School and Stall, to an 80% growth factor, or I guess I should say an 80% of the whole calculation before the weights are applied. So they receive a slightly lesser amount for those additional allocation increases that they see in weighted student funding, to try to make sure that the increases are moderated. If you go on to the next slide, this looks at the unique pupils served. So this number was in the 24,000, mid 24,000 range at the launch of the program. As of this year's 45-day, we're at 25,109. So that shows you all of the potential categories that a student could fit into uniquely. So you can see that there's 414 individual students that fit into all three of those categories. Most substantially 14,373 that are just a pupil in poverty, or 95 that are multilingual with disabilities. So we break all of those out. And that bottom line, the 25,109, is used in the annual calculation to determine the per pupil amount of funding for the upcoming year. So we take the total investment divided by the number of uniquely served pupils and come up with the new per pupil amount year over year, and then extrapolate that through all of the 45-day counts on a school by school basis. Go to the next slide. So there's some changes that we're recommending this year. We've continued to look at the ROI as we implement the ROI toolkit. And we've also looked at the way we distribute resources throughout the system, which is predominantly a formula based on the allocation schedules for enrollment to schools. But as the system has grown and things have changed over time, we've seen a large accumulation of positions that were allocated to schools and put in a column that was called the standard column, meaning they got it every year, but it wasn't based on a formula. So they might have gotten a couple of additional student concern specialist, or an additional receptionist, or some additional support position through maybe an additional assistant principal added to their schedule years ago, but there was never a basis for how that position was allocated. And our goal is to create models that promote equity, but also that are predictable and have a rational basis behind them, that also include the ROI and the SMART goal tracking that we've deployed in weighted student funding. So when we looked at this standard column, if you will, in the allocation schedule, there were 139.5 FTEs rolled up in that category, worth about $12.3 million a year, that didn't have an underlying basis. And so as we looked at what we wanted to do there, obviously these schools have gotten these resources historically, or they've been added over time. And we wanted to make sure that the dollars that were being invested were being distributed more equitably. So standard really did not have a basis. It was just meant that it was in the budget. That, it wasn't formula driven at all. And it didn't really promote that equitable distribution. So what we're proposing to do for FY27 is to shift these dollars into weighted student funding. So that means that the $12.3 million that was previously associated with the investment in standard allocations will now move into the weighted student funding model and be distributed through the WSF formula, with some provisions for hold harmless for schools that might lose in that outset year as a result of the change. If you go to the next slide. When we looked at that column, these were the most significant classifications. There were some assistant principals, teacher assistants for computers, math coaches, student concern specialists, lead teachers. A lot of those positions existed back in the day when we didn't have assistant at every school, but now we do. Every school in the system has at least one 240-day assistant principal, additional school counselors, focus facilitators, receptionists, across the system. So if you go to the next slide, we took that $12.3 million, divided by the number of uniquely served pupils in the weighted student funding model to create an add-on WSF amount to the base WSF formula. So it adds on $471.31 in additional per pupil allocation based on the current 45-day enrollment. But one thing that we did here is we recognized that we have continued to advance our special education services throughout the district. And in consideration of the investment that we're making this year, we want to shift that 0.85 weight for special education services to a 1.0 across the entirety of the model for FY28. So for the add-on formula, we went ahead and adjusted the students with disabilities weight from 0.85 to 1.0. We're going to continue to analyze the ROI on the student with disabilities investment and the outcomes over the course of the next year as we track the actual performance of students with disabilities across the various categories over the year with summative informative data. And we'll look at making a recommendation for FY28 to bring the entire model. So the base model is still a 0.85, but the add-on model is a 1.0. So that 0.15 additional weight added for students with disabilities. So
Have to
ultimately,
remark, like all the tweaking is just, it's really impressive. Like getting down to those details about how to tweak and shift things to balance things out and to reallocate as necessary.
well, and thank you.
Commend the team for that.
And it helps our principals too, because when they look at, we gave them their proposed WSF wallets a couple of weeks ago to help them build their plans around this. And when they look at how much they're getting for pupils in poverty, students with disabilities, and multilingual learners, we really try to encourage them to build their investments around strategies that serve those groups dedicated to the dollars that they're receiving in those areas. And before, they might have been getting these positions, but they were serving some completely different purpose. And so they really are now having to build strategies around supporting those individual pupil groups and showing progress within those pupil groups as a result. Even if it just means, bringing that position in and refocusing what it's doing. If they believe that the position that they had needs to be added back to their WSF plan, now there's a strategy behind it. And so it's given them a higher level of accountability, but also additional transparency into where the dollars are coming from in terms of their individual school plans. So that's the kind of totality of WSF. There's one additional piece to it. I think we did a lot, but there's one additional piece to it. And this is really driven by the Read to Succeed Act that the General Assembly passed a couple of years ago. We've talked about it a little bit. We've made some investments over the last 2 years to add funding to get our classified reading assistants or classified reading coaches converted to certified positions, because Read to Succeed requires that for that one-on-one instruction that students are in front of a certified teacher, not a classified position for, reading teacher assistant or reading coach. And we really weren't seeing the progress. We set aside funding to convert a third of the roughly 80 positions that we have focused on those responsibilities throughout our schools over the last 3 years, and we've only seen 3 positions go certified. And so as the state really kind of tamps down on its enforcement of Read to Succeed, we wanted to implement a strategy that promoted, a more direct approach to moving in the direction of Read to Succeed execution. So we took all of the dollars that were invested in these 80 some odd positions across the system, similarly to the standard allocation conversation we just had, and we're running them through a formula that allocates the dollars to schools based on the number of pupils that they have that are either does not meets in that category or scored less than a 30th percentile on Winter iReady for reading. And so based on the number of students in those categories, they get an additional $876 per pupil that can only be used on Read to Succeed eligible reading intervention strategies. So they have to meet the classification of Read to Succeed Act in using those funds. And we saw some redistribution. There is no hold harmless here. So they get the funds that they earn based on their does not meets or less than 30th percentile iReady Winter 2026 data. And that'll adjust every year. But to meet some of the considerations of Read to Succeed, schools that might have lost and want to, really thoughtfully implement a database strategy that's driven by, SMART goals and some of their assessment data that they're considering. Our curriculum and instruction team is going to have a $1.5 million contingency that they're able to allocate to schools to add on to their per pupil amount to build these strategies. And what's coincidental about that number is it was the amount that we were going to budget for teacher certification conversions anyways. So we were going to set that money aside and ultimately not use it if historical trends over the last 2 years have shown us anything. So now we're going to give the curriculum and instruction team that money, and they will be able to bolt it on to schools' individual allocations based on that formula to deploy Read to Succeed certified strategies in schools and create accountability, also tied to SMART goals, the same way that WSF works, just for reading. So that's about a $9 million total program, but it all comes from existing funding that was being given to schools with no underlying formula. Some schools might have had 3 reading coaches, but they weren't specifically allocated with any underlying data or formula. And so this creates a more equitable distribution of those resources as well. So we've got a couple of graphics related to that. If you go to the next slide. So that's kind of what I just explained, why we needed the change, what's changing, and what ultimately happens. And then if you go to the next one, kind of the flow chart, if you will, for the inconsistency in the current allocation formula. Also underserved middle schools. So our middle schools weren't receiving any reading support through this type of allocation. So elementary schools were getting the master reading teachers and reading coaches and some of the teacher assistant positions, but middle schools weren't getting those resources. And so we added the middle school does not meets and iReady data into this formula so that they also receive resources through this process. All that literacy data is taken into consideration, and then ultimately they have to use that funding tied to those SMART goals to be able to deploy strategies. And if the strategy doesn't drive an outcome, then they're going to be held accountable for how they use those dollars, and we'll pivot and do something different based on our overall analysis of what's working across the system as these strategies are deployed.
Mr. Prentice, not to interrupt you, but we're focusing a lot on literacy. How about math?
So I don't know, do you want to touch on that? So we've seen a lot of WSF strategy deployment in the math area. And so we believe that WSF is doing a good job right now of assisting with math, particularly in math coaches and math intervention. There's also some allocations that schools receive that focus on math. Reading with the Read to Succeed Act was really the critical area that we needed to consider. And also when you consider the district strategic plan, and our goal by 2027 and the current plan, all of that rolled together really directed the focus, particularly within our early grades.
Okay, I will default to your expertise.
Well, and I'm talking peripherally on some of the strategy piece, and Dr. Clamp and Superintendent Huggins want to speak further.
Meeting with my principals, our literacy is going way up, but our math is like, so if the West Ashley schools where literacy is hitting in the 90 percentile, math is still down in the 70 percentile range. Dr. Clamp, did you have something you wanted to?
I just wanted to say that schools are being really strategic about, even in the moment, the use of WSF funds for high leverage tutoring and mathematics specifically. And so those outcome-based contracts are really presenting outcomes. Ms. Huggins and I actually got to be with one of our vendors who was presenting some really profound data. So our mathematics implementation of new curriculum this year has been very well received as well. So we're proud of that implementation. Again, that's first year instructional materials for all of the tested areas. So we're certainly providing some very significant support in literacy, but very proud of where the mathematics progression is going.
Yeah,
We're watching the data, Mrs. Watley. We're watching the data carefully. And so this really isn't a response to the data. And so that the audit finance members know, the change in the WSF is also based on the data. What's currently suggestive by student outcomes is that the WSF is making a significant difference with students. And so, we're increasing that. But as Daniel noted, we're transitioning positions into the WSF understanding that SMART goals will be created for those positions and those folks will be held accountable for those results. And so we're watching. We do have some grants from the State Department also for math. Another reason we're focusing these efforts more on literacy. But it's not to say that we won't transition or make modifications as needed.
Thank you. Mr.
If you go to the next slide, I really covered this. This was kind of the lead in terms of how it's considered and, the supplemental strategy funding of $1.5 million. So there's nothing really else to cover there. So if we go ahead and go to the next one, this kind of brings it all home. So when you think about the base WSF, the $37 million that we talked about, we do have some contingency. I broke that out. You've heard us talk about, making adjustments for benefits and things throughout the year. So very small contingency of $456,000 that's included in that base number. The hold harmless piece, the standard positions reallocations, the literacy intervention reallocation, and then the literacy contingency that we were budgeting as a set aside for Read to Succeed conversion, all told is $63.4 million. So for FY27, you'll see kind of two buckets of WSF for the base at WSF and then the standard position reallocation. And then going into the next year, that'll all kind of blend together. But really, principals have greater ability now to align their resources directly with student needs based on their data. All of this has a framework built around it. There's a whole portal and strategy development application that's been built where principals input their formative and summative data. They track the outcomes. It all, kind of provides a live feed to administration for tracking and then creates an accountability model for them in terms of seeing what works and what doesn't work. And with that ROI piece that I mentioned, it's going to provide a scorecard that kind of heat maps the strategies that are the most expensive but still effective and the most efficient and highly effective so that principals can try to deploy the most cost efficient and effective strategies to use every dollar wisely and to shift the way they're thinking about things outside of just what people do I need in my building, which has been the traditional model of how principals and schools receive allocations. So all in, that's what we're looking at for WSF for FY27. And then the final slide, if you go to the last one there.
Mr. Prentice, before we go to the final one more question.
Uh-huh.
Area of need that I haven't heard addressed yet, but are we wrapping in additional supports for special ed?
Yes, ma'am.
The administration's making the biggest investment in special ed since my tenure in the district, $3.2 million.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mid-year, we opened 3 new classrooms, hired 10 new positions because of the significant feedback that we've gotten from school leaders and teachers about the need for increased resources. Additionally, as Mr. Garrett can understand, over the course of the last couple of years, particularly post-COVID, more and more students have been identified, particularly with challenges related to behaviors, not necessarily special education behaviors. That's required the addition of more resources. So $3.2 million. There'll be an announcement to the media soon. I haven't yet reviewed it, but it's in progress.
I apologize for getting ahead of you guys.
You're okay. You're okay. Also, I will note the day treatment that Thrive program that Mr. Apprentice referenced is one of 2 in the state. And Dr. Cole, the president of MUSC, has worked really carefully with us on that. It's something that we believe will be a game changer for kids, and we're really excited to be able to offer it on our campus because of the kind of behaviors that we're experiencing in our classrooms.
Mr. Prentice.
Thank you. So just tying it all back up, when you look at the top chart, that's the revenues across the district. So that wedge of 67% represents our local revenues. And that wedge does continue to grow a little bit year over year as our property tax base is outpacing growth in state revenues all in all. And when you consider index of tax paying ability, that number down there, the 0.13197, that number has continued to decrease, which is a good thing as other parts of the state are growing and taking more of the assessed value as a whole. Doesn't mean anything by way of lack of growth in Charleston. It just means that you're seeing pockets of growth elsewhere in the state that weren't being seen. And historically, that number was above 14%. So that 0.13197 means that Charleston County's tax base has approximately 13.2% of the assessed value statewide across the entirety of South Carolina's assessed value. On the expenditure side, of course, the contracts that we have for transportation services and day porters and custodial, we have less of a percentage of salaries and benefits than most districts because some of that is in the operating carve out. And so, those are non-salary costs for us that are, in-house salary costs for other districts, but we're at 68% salaries and benefits, 18% operating, and 14% transfers out, which includes the transfer out for weighted student funding, for the piece that goes to the weighted student funding fund, because all of those dollars are administered for accounting purposes separately from the general operating fund. And then what's next? We have April 1st, Audit and Finance Committee with a budget workshop through Committee of the Whole on April 13th. And then I mentioned that special called Audit and Finance Committee will happen in between the budget workshop and the board meeting on April 27th, where we recommend first reading to the board. And then we'll have another Audit and Finance Committee and budget workshop, followed by a second reading and public hearing in May before we go into Memorial Day weekend. So appreciate everyone's engagement with this morning and happy to answer any other questions. But we are going to come back 3 more times before we get to the finish line to go through all of this, and we'll continue to refine.
Can we advance to that slide? That slide that's on your screen?
It's up there.
It's up there now.
And now it is. Okay, it wasn't when yeah. I just wanted the folks online to be able to get that information.
Okay.
Do we have any questions?
So we're gonna be done with budget by end of May?
That's the goal. Yes, sir.
It would be our preference, sir. Yes. And I really have to thank the CFO for an exceptional job with his team here. Some are represented back here in the back for doing the heavy lifting to get it ready. And their one-on-one work with principals, they really have been fantastic.
Is there anything else?
I would just add kudos to the team. I know that we're still early in the process, but excellent foresight and thought. And I appreciate all the future planning components to it that are helpful. And I think it's really very clear and very helpful. Thanks.
That means a lot coming from this committee. Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you.
Mr. Rooster?
I would just echo that. Very thorough. Thank you for the presentation. I do like that you have mental health capacity in there too.
Yes,
I
sir.
think is very important. Thank you for your.
Thank you.
For the folks online, Meredith, Stephen, Miss Bailey. All right.
Questions, just great work.
Yep.
Thank you.
With that, we will move on to the closing items for upcoming meetings, April 1st, 2026. And next, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody have a wonderful day. Thank
Second
you very
meeting this
much.
week does ended early. The second one. Thank you, Mr. Worcester, for your help.